In the news tonight, the Prime Minister tells a donors conference in Kuwait that a protracted crisis in Syria has stretched the kingdom's resources to the limit as it hosts an estimated 1.4 million refugees. Iraqi troops aided by Shiite paramilitaries drive Daesh terrorists out of the central Tikrit, but the fight continues towards control of the whole city. And just a few hours before a deadline for a nuclear deal between Iran and world powers, the United States says it is ready to work through the day tomorrow if conversations are constructive. Good evening and welcome to a new edition of the news. Jordan tomorrow will officially take over the rotating presidency of the United Nations Security Council. During the kingdom's one-month presidency, a number of crucial issues will be on the table for discussion, both regional and international, namely the Palestinian issue, the crisis in Syria and Iraq, the situation in Yemen and Libya, as well as the fight against terrorism and extremism. Jordan previously presided over the council in January 2014 after it was elected as a non-permanent member for 2 years until the end of this year. Prime Minister Abdullah Mansour told a donors conference convening in the Kuwaiti capital that Jordan estimates the cost of its response plan to Syrian refugees for 2015 at $3 billion. He appealed to international donors to finance the plan drawn out to meet the needs for both refugees and host communities. Jordan currently hosts an estimated 1.4 million Syrians, said Mansour, and as the crisis enters its fifth year, Jordan has already stretched its resources to the limit. While expressing Jordan's appreciation of support received last year, Mansour said funds totaled $854 million, which only amounted to 38% of what was needed, which according to the United Nations and the Jordan government assessment should have been $2.28 billion. He warned of catastrophic consequences in the event of not receiving the necessary funds for this year's response plan, saying a worsening situation could trigger extremism in the country. The third International Humanitarian Pledge Conference for Syria convened in Kuwait with the participation of 78 countries as well as 40 international organizations. Kuwaiti leader Sheikh Sabah Al-Ahmed Al-Sabah announced a pledge of $500,000 to Syria, describing the crisis as the biggest human catastrophe in modern history. In total, countries offered $3.8 billion to help the humanitarian crisis in Syria, as stated by UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon. The United Nations has appealed for $8.4 billion this year to fund aid effort to help 18 million people inside Syria and those scattered throughout the region by more than 4 years of civil war, as well as the country and communities struggling to host them. On the ground, Daesh terrorists killed at least 37 people in the Syrian village near the city of Hama overnight, according to the Syrian Observatory of Human Rights. The observatory said that Daesh terrorists killed entire families and the dead included people who were burned to death. Syrian state television put the number killed at 44 and said 21 others were wounded in the attack on Mabuja, 60 kilometers east of Hama, but a military source said the army has replied the assault and taken control of the village. The area is some 200 kilometers from Raqqa, the de facto capital of Daesh's self-declared caliphate. Daesh has been moving westwards across Syria, and its members say they plan to take Salamiya, a town east of Hama city, before taking control of the provincial capital itself. Meanwhile, Syrian state television said the Syrian army has secured a mountain range near Damascus in an operation against insurgents. The army launched a campaign last week to reclaim the Zabadani region, 50 kilometers northwest of Damascus and part of an area near the border with Lebanon, where army has often clashed with insurgents, including Al-Qaeda Nusra Front. The television said units of the army are in full control of the western mountain range of Zabadani, adding that a number of terrorists have been killed. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights said there were ongoing clashes between radical groups and government forces backed by allied fighters in the mountain area. The Zabadani advance comes days after Nusra Front and allied insurgents seized the city of Idlib in the northwestern corner of Syria near the border with Turkey. Over to Iraq, where Iraqi troops aided by Shiite paramilitaries have driven Daesh terrorists out of central Tikrit, but the fight to retake all of the town continues. Prime Minister Haider al-Abadi said in a statement security forces have reached the center of Tikrit and liberated the southern and western sides and are moving towards the control of the whole city. In their push from southern Tikrit, security forces and paramilitary fighters retook the governor's headquarters and the main hospital, which has been occupied by Daesh. Shiite militia groups also returned today to the battle after suspending operations last Thursday when U.S.-led airstrikes were requested by the Prime Minister. U.S. and allied military forces have carried out 8 airstrikes against Daesh terrorists in Iraq and Syria since early yesterday. According to a U.S. military statement, bombers, fighters, and attack aircraft hit Daesh targets near several cities, including Mosul and Tikrit, in 7 strikes. One strike in Syria hit targets near the northern border town of Kobani. Hundreds are estimated to have left Europe to join Daesh and fight in the Middle East, as fear of attacks run high in Europe, especially after the Paris attack that killed 17 people. Today, Austria charged a 14-year-old boy with terror offenses after he researched how to build a bomb online and made contact with militants supporting Daesh terrorists in Syria. And in Spain also today, authorities arrested 2 teenagers who were planning to travel to Syria through Turkey. Here's more.
2 young men under the age of 16 have been arrested in Badalona, Spain, along with 2 adult suspects, the same day they were allegedly due to travel to Syria to fight with Islamist militants. The Spanish Interior Ministry says the teen's brother had already been recruited and fought for Islamic State in Syria. He died last year. Authorities say the teenagers had dropped out of school to study at an Islamic center in Morocco, and that those close to them knew of their plans to travel to Syria via Turkey, including their mother. Spain has been stepping up its efforts to prevent young Muslims from being recruited by militant groups ever since the Charlie Hebdo attacks in Paris earlier this year.
Saudi troops clashed with Yemeni Houthi fighters in the heaviest exchange of cross-border fire since the start of a Saudi-led offensive last week, while Yemen's foreign minister called for a rapid Arab intervention on the ground. Residents and tribal sources in North Yemen reported artillery and rocket exchanges along several stretches of the Saudi border. At least 36 people were killed when Houthi forces shelled loyalists to the Yemeni president in Aden. Repeated airstrikes hit positions of the Houthi and their allies, including an ammunition store at a military base, causing huge explosions. An eyewitness said 9 southern fighters were killed, along with around 30 Houthi and allied fighters. In the central town of Yarim, an airstrike hit a fuel tanker, killing at least 10 people. Saudi authorities say they have gathered troops along the border in preparation for any possible ground offensive, while Pakistan has also said it is sending troops to support Saudi Arabia. And after the break, a major power outage hits cities and provinces across Turkey, including the capital Ankara and Istanbul. Also, the first ever exhibition devoted to French couturier Jean-Paul Gaultier opens its door in Paris. And the clock is ticking for a nuclear deal between Iran and world powers after negotiations entered their crucial final day today. Foreign ministers from Iran and 6 world powers are still trying to reach a visible outcome to end the marathon talks tonight. There were various reports coming out of Lausanne, some maintaining the gaps are still far between parties, while others have cited only small differences are left to be sorted out. At a joint news conference in Berlin with the French president, German Chancellor Angela Merkel said it would be a positive message if negotiators reached a deal, but did not mention a breakthrough taking place, while French President François Hollande said it would be better to have no deal than a bad deal. With a few hours left before the deadline, a White House statement said the United States was prepared to work past the midnight deadline into tomorrow as long as conversations were productive.
Now, it's still March 31st. Our negotiators are engaged in serious negotiations that have been going on for not just over the course of the last year, which is relevant here, but also over the last day. They've been engaged in very serious negotiations. And if it's necessary, and when I say if it's necessary, I mean if it's midnight and a deal has not been reached, but the conversations continue to be productive, then they'd be prepared to continue the talks into tomorrow. Well, I don't want to, at this point, our negotiators are still having constructive conversations, and we haven't reached the deadline yet. What my colleagues in Europe have indicated is that if the conversations continue to be productive, but yet aren't finalized by the end of the day today, that they would leave open the possibility of continuing those negotiations. So I wouldn't want to speculate about events beyond that.
A major power outage hit cities and provinces across Turkey, including the capital Ankara and the biggest city Istanbul, where parts of the underground system were shut down and shopping malls were plunged into darkness. Prime Minister Ahmed Davutoglu said all possible causes of the outage were being investigated and did not rule out sabotage. He said, however, that trouble with transmission line was most likely the reason for the problem. Such widespread power outages are rare. Energy officials said it was Turkey's biggest blackout in 15 years. The first ever Parisian exhibition devoted to French couturier Jean-Paul Gaultier will open its doors in the capital's Grand Palais Museum. On display are 336 pieces, ready-to-wear outfits designed between 1976 and 2015, but also photos and videos. The pieces are displayed by theme and not by chronological order. Known for his avant-garde style and love of counterculture, Gaultier said the exhibition was a creation in itself and not a retrospective. Another particular aspect of its production are the personal elements of Gaultier's childhood that represent the roots of his inspiration and innovations. The exhibition will run from April 1st to August 3rd. We begin with tennis. Defending champion Novak Djokovic defeated Belgium's Steve Darcy 6-love, 7-5 to power into the last 16 of the Miami Open, along with American John Isner. The Serbian world number 1 will face Alexander Dolgopolov, a 7-5, 6-4 winner over Brazilian Thomas Bellucci in the 4th round. Djokovic wrapped up a one-sided first set in 26 minutes, but faced a sterner test in the second. Isner provided an upset as the 22nd seed won 7-6, 6-2 over 9th-seeded Bulgarian Grigor Dimitrov, while Spain's 6th seed David Ferrer got past Czech Lucas Rosol 6-4, 7-5. Four boats in the Volvo Ocean Race celebrated rounding the venerated landmark of Cape Horn. Team Alvi Medica had the honor of leading the battered fleet past the Fable, just 15 minutes clear of the overall race leaders Abu Dhabi Ocean Racing. Mapfre and Team Brunel were hot on their heels as the fleet prepared to head north at last and back into the Atlantic for the first time since November. They still have quite a challenge in store, navigating up the Brazilian coast toward the final leg 5 destination of Itajuri. And finally, relatively cold weather continues tonight with partly cloudy skies and a chance for light showers. Winds will be westerly moderate to brisk. Similar conditions prevail tomorrow with a continued chance for light rain in the northern and central regions. Winds will be westerly moderate to fresh. The Gulf of Aqaba should expect moderate conditions tomorrow with northerly moderate to brisk winds and slightly choppy seas. Next are the lows and highs for tonight and tomorrow. And to end the news, here's a recap of our top stories. The Prime Minister tells a donors conference in Kuwait that a protracted crisis in Syria has stretched the kingdom's resources to the limit as it hosts an estimated 1.4 million refugees. Iraqi troops aided by Shiite paramilitaries drive Daesh terrorists out of central Tikrit, but the fight continues towards control of the whole city. And with just a few hours before a deadline for a nuclear deal between Iran and world powers, the United States says it is ready to work through the day tomorrow if conversations are constructive. And with this, we come to an end. I'm Farah Ajlouni. Thank you for watching. Have a good night.